Hello, Asia.
And hello, world. And as we have noticed, women have been at the forefront of movements, innovations, and change. They have taken up spaces in various fields, including in civil society organizations. They have occupied leadership and key positions, which positively shape programs and activities that improve representation and promote inclusion of women and other vulnerable sectors. However, for those working in the fields of democracy building and human rights, the challenge remains steep as women continue struggle to break glass ceilings and shift societal biases away from sexism.
During the super election year, women's representation in political leadership remained critically low, according to UN Women, and with only 5 women elected as heads of state out of 31 direct presidential elections held worldwide, while women's representation in parliament remained stagnant at 27% in 2024. While significant milestones in women empowerment have been achieved, from pushing for the right to vote up to women being elected in high positions of power, women remain underrepresented in many aspects of governance, which in turn affect effective policymaking that could address women's issues and challenges.
And as we celebrate International Women's Day this March, so ANFREL, the Asian Network for Free Elections, we invited women leaders, actually one of a kind women leaders from civil society organizations here at the Election Observer podcast. So we will be tackling issues and challenges that women face in engaging and participating in democratic processes like elections and identify possible solutions to improve representation and inclusion in governance and policymaking.
I'm your host, John Antiquera, and joining me today as co-host is the first ever guest of the show, Anfral Executive Director Briza Rosales. Hi, Briza.
Yes, John. Actually, thank you for having me back. And of course, we are live via Anfral's Facebook and LinkedIn pages, as well as Anfral's YouTube channel. So we have YouTube channel, John. But yeah, for today's episode, joining us today is, of course, I hope I will pronounce her name correctly. So we have Cardenisa Nur Agostiati, the Executive Director of Perkumpulan untuk Pemilu dan Demokrasi or Perludem in Indonesia. And our second guest is Miss Elberal Dava, the Executive Director of the Women for Social Progress in Mongolia, and Miss Isha Trilwina, the Executive Director of Transparency Maldives. So good afternoon, Ninis, Elberel, and Rilu. Welcome to the show.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
However, yeah, all right. So I hope everyone is doing good and we can start our discussion right now this afternoon. So probably I'll go now to the first question. These questions are probably hard to answer, but hopefully you will be enjoying our discussion. Yeah, actually for question number one, just to kickstart our discussion, why do you think women remain underrepresented in governance? What issues and challenges, like as women, that we need to overcome? So anyone can answer. Who wants to go first?
Okay, maybe I go first, Briza and
Yes,
everyone.
Ninis.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, I guess why women still underrepresented until now in the context of Indonesia. We are already in the Reformation era since 1998, and women representation still under the critical number 30%. So many factors. I think the biggest challenge is about the patriarchy culture here in Indonesia is still high. Women are still yeah, sometimes political parties are not accepting women as a woman political candidate because we yeah, as a woman it's not easy to enter the political ecosystem. Unlimited access, double burden, marginalization, because sometimes the political ecosystem is so mainly not friendly to women. lack of resources. So and also the acceptance from the public itself, it's also because sometimes there is some like women is not suitable as a leader, as our leader. And also there is still like mistranslation of religion, for example, that woman is not allowed as a leader. So that's there, so there's so many factors, I guess, Brisa. That is why women is still underrepresented, but I think the biggest challenge is about access to enter the political ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you, Ninis. How about Rilu and Elberel? Of course, they can give different perspective and context, especially that Rilu also came from South Asia, Elberel from East Asia. So it's a different perspective all along. Yeah, Rilu, Elberel.
Across Asia, I think several of the issues are similar. We also have the same patriarchal culture. There is this perception that women should stay at home. They are the primary caregivers. So even if they are to enter politics, they have to take these dual roles. So unless there is a enabling environment, we see progress. I think we do get fixated on numbers, like representation is very important. But what happens when people are actually once they are there, once they have reached the glass ceiling, are they there to stay? But we see across the globe, not only in Asia, even in the Western countries, we see like female CEOs, they don't last very long. So then we have to look back at what are the conditions that allowed them to be there. So we have to look beyond personal personal qualities, because I mean, because every person comes with intersectionality. There will be, I mean, you might belong to privileged families or things like that. So in terms of the issues in the Maldives, we have actually been regressing. We have had positive steps come. Unfortunately, in the last parliamentary election, we currently have only 3.2% of women in our parliament. If we look at our cabinet ministers, out of the 14, we only have two female cabinet ministers. So from the last administration, even this, we are seeing it going down. We had our first judge appointed in 2007, two judges appointed to the Supreme Court in 2019. But right now, even as we speak, there is a row going on reducing the bench, and we are fearful that when they reduce bench, oftentimes it's the women who would be sacrificed, who would be removed when these things come. So I think there's also been this phenomena of glass cliff. So when women go at the top, we find that it's very easy to fall off. There's not a supportive environment for them to build and grow there, or even to be seen as role models. And even in our last parliamentary election, we saw about 43 female candidates contesting for 93 positions, but unfortunately only 3 people who were elected. And when we look at the background of these people, they come from politically elite families. They have certain criteria that allow them to cross over. But even when once they cross over, are they being treated the same as their male counterparts? This is something that we need to look at. And when we see women struggling at the top, people are hesitant to strive or achieve to that goal. And one of the criticisms in the Maldives is that it's women who don't vote for women as well. But we have to understand why women don't vote for women. And I think in Indonesia, in the Maldives also, religion is often used as an excuse by political parties or political elites to justify women staying at home and not taking on these leadership positions. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, Elberel,
um,
go ahead.
was, so hello everybody. Um, when we talk about women's participation in, politics and governance and decision making, um, based on the experience in Mongolia and our history of women's participation, the reason that we still lacked, and emphasizes on the word lacked, is that of women in parliament or in decision making process, is that it does not there is not a single one or a certain typical issue or a challenge that kind of limits women's participation. It's quite complex. I mean, it requires, the legal reforms, the laws, and the legal environment has to allow, has to be open and have access to women's participation. Um, which is one. Number two is that political parties themselves also have to um, uh, also have to have a policy or a willpower to support women candidates, to make sure that they run for candidacy and that they're actually supported from the parliament, from the political parties. And third is that other stakeholders, such as media, also has to have a gender aware reporting policy, so that when women are represented, when women are introduced to the public, they are not kind of judged, or they are not represented based on gender stereotypes or gender inequality. And then the fourth is obviously the voters. The voters also need to have an understanding and a perception that women is capable of being in parliament, being a part of decision making process just like a man. So that the voters on the other hand also need to understand and be aware of why women should be in parliament, why women should be in decision making, and what is the benefits of having more women in decision making process, and how those decisions benefit us. So I think you know the challenges of having more women in parliament is that all these factors kind of need to cooperate and correlate with one another, so that it kind of provides very supportive environment for women. In Mongolia, we had a lot of history of women's participation, but we lacked in terms of number. We lacked women's representation, especially in parliament, which was only the highest we ever had before 2024 was 17%. But we had our general election in 2024, which the number of women's percentage representation went from 17% to 24.5%, which is above the Asian, just a little bit above the Asian average, and kind of going towards the, filling the world average. And we had from 13 women to 32 women now in parliament. And when you look at those, the factors those that influence for Mongolia to have more women is that one was the legal frameworks. We set a gender quota for. We usually fight for 30%, and we usually end up with 20%. But this time, by constitutional amendments, we had 30%, and we will have 40% gender quota in 2028 election, which was one thing. The second is the political election law, which allowed us to have mixed system, where we had the mixed system. The party list will have one-on-one, kind of a zipper system, which is men, women, men, women, men, women, which allowed to have more women. And also there's many attempts and initiations working with media, make sure that they are gender aware, that they represent women to the public without any gender stereotypes, because we do have a lot of those in media previously. And also we worked with the voters. So I think all those factors kind of needed to make sure that women's representation is increased and it's actually maintained.
Yeah, thank you, Elberel, Nidis, and Rilu. Actually, going to the point that you have already mentioned, Elberel, sorry for this follow-up question, since everyone mentioned about the challenges, the barriers, and the system being implemented in your respective country. And you've mentioned about gender quota. Do you think, in your own personal view, do you think it's effective? Is gender quota effective? And if not, sorry for this another follow-up question. Do we need additional measures to ensure meaningful representation?
Yeah, I think gender quota is like a fast track, Briza, because if there is no, it's like an affirmative action. Because if we don't have this fast track, it's very hard for women to catch up with the men in the politics. So that is why a woman quota is one way to catch up with the so we have a more woman representation in the politics. But of course, sometimes it's not enough um, because for example in Indonesia the gender quota is just for the nomination, but for the result it's still based on how many votes that they can get in the election. So each political parties have to nominate at least 30% of women, only stop in the nomination stages. But for the result it's the vote, the highest votes that can get the seat. So that is why here in Indonesia we and also in Indonesia, because we adopt the open proportional system, even though the candidate can get votes directly from the voters, but if you are put in the small number, for example number one, number two, number three on the list, the potential to win the election is higher, because sometimes Indonesian people, Indonesian voters think that, oh, if you are put in the number one, it means you are the best candidate on that political parties. So that is why we also encourage the political parties to nominate women in the number one or number two, because sometimes women are in the number 10 or number 9. So voters see that, oh, I don't know this candidate. The other I think the other way is to give the incentive for the political parties. For example, from the state budget, incentive, like if political parties can have more women representation in the parliament, maybe the state can increase the state budget for the political parties itself, because sometimes political parties still ask the question, what is our incentive if we have more women in the parliament, for example.
Rilu Elberel, do you want to add something
Yeah,
about gender
I think
quota? Yeah.
quotas are definitely helpful in like she said, in fast tracking people, I mean women's journey towards in these processes. But we have had a we have gender quota introduced in our local government elections. So the first election was in 2021. We had the first election with a gender quota. But unfortunately, what one of the lessons from that experience is, when the quota came in, there was no real voter education on what it was trying to do. There was not a lot of support from political parties even. So we had political parties fielding female candidates, and we actually achieved that quota in the local council election. So what happened was, these two seats were reserved. So there was across the country from different parties as well. We saw that these was flaunted as female seats. So in instances where there were candidates who actually contested and won the mayorship, or there were females who actually were successful before in contesting and winning the presidents of the councils. But unfortunately, with the quota, there was a move saying that, oh, you should only contest for these two positions. So in leadership positions within councils also, we saw a move for men taking over. It's definitely has worked. There was a recent study by UNDP on how effective the quota was. So it definitely helped. It did encourage people in coming forward. We also did, when we did the election observation for the local councils, we interviewed with lots of female candidates, and a lot of them reaffirmed that they wouldn't have, or their families wouldn't have supported them, or wouldn't have been as encouraging if the quota was not there. So the quota was helpful, but it was also used by politicians to favor more women, more men coming into leadership roles within the local government as well. So we have to take it with with a bit of salt, and we have to also look at what other the quota itself doesn't help, because we have seen even in instances where there are female councillors, they are still being given very gender stereotype roles. So there will be the two female council members would be responsible for the social issues, for very very domesticated kind of roles, and they would be removed from some of the other decision making within the councils. This is not the same everywhere, but there are still regions in the country where this is more prevalent. So it shows that more work and education needs to be done in not only empowering women and doing trainings for them, leadership trainings for them, but also in looking at the system surrounding them. Are they being paid, and do they have the proper mechanisms internally? Are they being involved, and are they being invited to discussions or leadership? Important discussions in the community. So these are things that we need to really look at. And unfortunately, with that, there was also another requirement where local women development committees were elected in the Maldives, and again that came without a lot of education. These were traditionally voluntary roles, so now suddenly they are elected people. They have a small budget that is supported by the councils, and we saw a lot of people leaving. They were elected, but they left. So there are a lot of by elections happening, and people are seeing this as a backstep, saying that, oh, this is what happens when you give people leadership positions when they are not ready. But we also have to look at why people are leaving. What causes them to step back and give up their roles. So I think in terms of some of the good practices, quotas have been introduced in the Scandinavian countries, in Australia and places, but some of the differences between the two is, in Australia, for example, I was recently in Australia on one of the leadership trainings, and this was one of the topics that came up quite a lot. They actually did make a lot of effort in building a group of, building women who could become qualified and who could be good leaders and who could actually play the roles well. It's not only, I don't want to say it's only on women, it's also the surrounding environment that needs to be more conducive for women to be able to take on these positions that the quotas kind of facilitate.
Alberan?
Sure. Obviously, like my colleagues said, gender quota it's very useful, especially when we talk about women's representation and participation, because I think it's the first step for women to step into the political world. But without the quota, it's quite difficult. So the quota is there to represent, to ensure quantity of women. Mongolia has, for the last 20 years, we usually have women's organizations especially push for 30%, and then usually just before the elections, the election laws will be changed and amended, and we'll go back to 20%. And we had a long-running history of having a 20%, 30%, 20%, 30% quota, which we set at 30 now. But this is the first initial step. But like our colleague said, it's only to ensuring quantity. But when we talk about quality of women, of candidates, it's quite a different issue. It's another topic that we could discuss. But definitely, I would say that quota is needed, recommended. Mongolia has a system in place where if you don't nominate at least 30% of a gender, in this case women, the political parties will not be allowed to run for elections. So, every political party will have to have the 30% women. But for local election, it's still 20%, where in local elections, we tend to have more women participating, but we only have a 20% quota. and there is no legal um, system set that will disqualify or kind of not allow political parties to run for election if they don't meet those 20% in local election. They could still run. So those kind of differences between the local and parliamentary elections regarding gender quota remains in Mongolia. But like I said, we did manage to include the quota in our constitution, which kind of allowed us to amend, kind of have a legal reform, especially on women's participation in last election. And that being said, I also wanted to kind of highlight how importance, no, how kind of the step forward for Mongolia was regarding gender quotas, that political parties, uh, based on the legal reform, which I've mentioned before, the political party law was also amended. And in that law, political parties needed to have at least 30% women in their institutional administration, which means administrative women in political parties, administrative positions, management positions, head of positions in political parties, 30% have to be women. And they have to, which means they will have to kind of internally change, structurally change, and they will have to report to the gender commission, National Gender Commission, of how they changed and how they fulfilled the 30% political party quota. And then they will, based on those reports and how they have fulfilled those changes, the state will be funding the political parties. So this became quite important legal reform in regards to increasing women's participation in political parties, decision making, and parliament and local elections. So I would definitely say that gender quotas is the first step for women to step into the political world.
Yeah.
If I can, yeah, add to
Yes,
that,
Rilu.
yeah, just two things I want to add. One common challenge in, I think, across the world is political party financing. In the Maldives, we don't have political party financing laws. So it's access to political party financing is one of the biggest hindrances. So having a quota alone doesn't really provide that access for women. And often we also see that in order to meet this gender quota, parties pitch women to on seats that are not really winnable. So we see if there's a very strong candidate, it could be female candidates who are, I mean, being put by opposition parties. So this is something that is quite common in the Maldives as well. So we have so if there is a very strong person who everyone knows would win, then people who would be contending or contesting with them might be women or women. I mean, people with other belonging to other minorities. So these are also two things that we have to consider when we are talking about quotas, because just opening the door itself is not enough. We have to actually have other systematic opportunities or ways made up for them to actually progress. Otherwise, it's just, oh, we've given you a quota, you still can't do this. So it just kind of reinforces existing stereotypes against women.
Yes. Yeah. John, just chime in if you have any follow-up questions for Ninis, Rilu, and Elberel. But yeah, actually, a lot has been discussed, a lot has been recommended. But actually, going to the next question, you've mentioned about the political finance law, the reform of strengthening gender quota, the incentives when it comes to the implementation of state funding. Um, what can we still done, especially to address the lack or low levels of representation and engagement of women and other vulnerable groups in governance? Actually, you've mentioned already, but going into specifics, what can we still do aside from voter education? What can we still do when it comes to internal party mechanisms? So something like to strengthen the policies in and out of the elections.
Yeah.
Yes, Denise.
Okay. Yeah. I think doing like awareness raising strategies can be one of the option, because sometimes why we still lack of women or other vulnerable groups is maybe because sometimes there is no personal testimonies or a champion, woman champion, or a youth champion that give their testimonies or break the silence, or yeah, we don't give them the room to speak up that, oh, if there's more women in the parliament, if there's more youth, more disability groups in the parliament, the democratic ecosystem will be more inclusive, or the advantages in having more women. I think personal testimonies is like a public campaign why it is important, more women in the politics. I think something like that can be used also as a public campaign. And the other thing is, for example, in Indonesia, sometimes why, for example, if women face violence against women in the politics, sometimes they don't want to talk about it because there's an assumption that this is politics, this is democracy, this is the price that we have to pay if we enter the politics. So there is no like a safe space for women to talk, to tell their stories, or how to make a report if they face any violence in the politics or in the election. So that is why data about violence against women in Indonesia still, we still don't have like how to access the data, because it's not easy to report it. Sometimes women don't know where to report. Is it safe? Or sometimes they are afraid if they talk about it, it will impact to their political career. So I think making the safe space for women can also be like a policy reform that we can advocate also.
Just I would reiterate what Nini has just said. I think two additional points I would like to make is we also need to make more use of evidence. Right now, like you said, it's very rarely documented what the experiences of people who are elected into these positions are, who contest even. I think we tend to forget the experiences of people who actually participate in these processes. We only focus on people who win, but what about the people who didn't win? Why didn't they win? What happened to them? So these stories have to be captured so that we can design programs that can help identify and actually address the root causes of why this is happening. Not, yes, this is happening, and just changing the quotas and other laws around that is not sufficient. And I believe we also need to have more males advocating for this rather than just
Definitely.
females talking about it. And I think it's often women, we are also able to come forward and be in these positions because we have a supportive family or supportive environment back home, and we need to have the same supportive environment in our workplace as well. So when we have like very different, when we are at home, when we are at home, we are with our people, we feel safe, we feel loved, we feel protected. But when we go to these political spaces, it's a constant fight. So sometimes the sacrifice is not worth conflicting these two identities. So it's very important that we have these role models and these safer, like people who can advocate for women's safety in the workplace and in the political spaces. Because often we see, just one example, if there's a female cabinet member, we see her being taken to the parliament for questioning so much more than a male cabinet member. We had a female anti-corruption commissioner before, commission president. She would be called to the parliament like every month or so. We don't see the same level of scrutiny over a male candidate. So these kind of practices also makes people hesitant to come forward, because you are putting your family, your entire, I mean, it's not only work when it comes to women. when a woman goes into work, they're also exposing their family in it. So we have to have the same kind of protective environment at home that we do have. We need that kind of environment in the workplace as well, for us to be an ambitious and strive for more.
Yeah,
Okay,
Alberal.
thank you. Of course. I do fully agree with our previous from what Rilu and Nini said. Just to add on those points, when I speak, I'm kind of highlighting this on a concept of Mongolia. So another thing that we could, do or we could implement is that when we talk about women's participation, especially in Mongolia, we always focus on it right before the elections. And the key kind of concept is that quantity, increase women's in numbers, increase their numbers, increase their numbers. And then the political parties, the legal reforms, the media, every stakeholder for the election kind of focuses on the quantity, the numbers. And then what happens when we do have, a certain amount of women or 30% women in parliament? And then that's where kind of the issue of quantity, not quantity, but quality of women and women candidates and their participation and engagement, the issue comes in. And one thing that I always kind of push, and I always talk about this, is that political party initiatives to have not more women, but also to have an initiative to make sure those women are re-elected in the next election, because election is a cycle. It's not from start to end point, journey. It's a cycle journey. So once, key focus is always about having more women in parliament. So what happens when we have women in parliament? What about the sustainability? What about the quality? What about the re-electing? So we always talk about, and I always push for political parties to have a long-term election cycle policy or program to support women, not to make sure that they are participating and they are nominated, but also to provide support after they become politicians. Because we, for example, we only have few women re-elected and elected in parliament now. So we want to maintain those, not only increase and then new women comes in the next election and then more new women comes in, but we do want that, but we also want to have the cycle of sustainability, so the women are re-elected and they maintain the sustainability of the policy making process. So for one would be that political parties have a long-term support program or initiative for women politicians. And the second is, I always, this is one of my key, wherever I'm going, I speak about this, is that voter education. I know you mentioned about besides voter education, but I want to highlight this because in Mongolia, in the 2024 elections, as I said, we had two system, majority and political party list, proportional system. Proportional party system, because we had the zipper system, from 48 political party listings, we had 24 women elected. But from the majority system, out of 370, I think, candidates, only 8 were elected, which means voters, there's more women. There's over 30%, it's about 38% women nominated, but they're not being elected. The voters are not electing women. We have more women, yes, but it's because of the proportional system, and they have not been elected by the voters. So we wanted to not inform and educate voters about, on elections or why women should participate, but I think we need to have more public education and voter education on gender stereotypes, why, about understanding about gender stereotypes, gender equality, so that they we don't want to say you have to support women, but we want the public to understand that women and men will have equal rights and they have the rights to participate and engage in elections and politics as much as, women have as much as right as men, and they're equal. So I think, any sort of public voter education is vital, and political party support is vital. And third would be the media, because media becomes a bridge between women candidates and public. So if the media kind of reports based, with gender bias, with gender stereotypes, that's how the voters will view women candidates. So I think, it's in terms of what we can do, I think we could work with all the stakeholders and in new ways, so that, we'll be able to have more women and maintain women's participation and sustainability.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Can can
Yeah,
can I just
John.
ask a follow up on this? No, because this is a panel. We've organized this panel to be really led by women leaders. No, and we talk about um, women participating in elections because there is a quota system, but they're not necessarily prepared for the work. I was curious, no, because you guys are leaders in your own organizations, no. I think if 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 there is um if you can give an advice to women who aspire to participate in elections, in governance, in leadership positions, how do you think they could prepare? What opportunities out there are available for women to be prepared for leadership positions? Brisa, you can
Mm.
also answer this question.
All right.
I, if I can go first, I think in there, I mean, we shouldn't think that women needs to prepare for these roles. We are is, I mean, we go through the same schooling system, we go through the same life experiences in, I mean, in terms of work. So it's just the environment is not often conducive for us to go there. So what do we need to make sure that the environments change? So that's why advocacy of some of the work that we do comes in. How do we encourage or even advocate for equal opportunities, equal pay, protection of minority votes, so minority rights. So it's there's so much. I mean, one thing that I understand is often, I mean, I might do a lot of leadership trainings and all of those things, but it's so when I come back, I have to come back to the same environment, same forces are at play. So unless we change some of the wind at home, these forces can might not be helpful. Of course, leadership trainings are good. I mean, we need to be more assertive. We need to be taking risks. But there should also be an environment, like I said before, that kind of facilitates our or allows us to grow there. So, as someone who has been leading a civil society organization, one thing is again empower my people. So just give them opportunity to grow into the roles, because we often tend to learn on the job as much as as others. I don't think there's a difference between women and men when it comes to that. It's if the environment is conducive, that is there. So I feel a strong focus should be on supporting the environment, while of course having equal opportunity to study and learn. And I think that especially in the Maldives, we girls do a lot better in schools. If you look at graduate rates, a lot of girls are able to they finish university more than boys, but somehow as they go along in their life, their choices or opportunities shrink, their ambitions change, and they change because of other reasons. They didn't when they finish school, they're, I mean, what they wanted to be then might still be there, but their reality has hit, showing that what kind of sacrifices you have to make when you enter into that. So I think it's the sacrifices that we have to look at. What do we have to give up? What are we not willing to give up? So I think for me, focus on the environment is equally important as building your own capacity, because I feel we are all strong, and we are given the right opportunity, everyone can thrive.
Yeah. Is it okay if I go?
Yes, please.
Um, I do fully agree with what Rilu said. Or to add on to Rilu's point, I think when we talk about women themselves, women politicians who aspire to be a politician one day, who are on the journey to be a politician, besides from the environment, and I think it's part of the environment as well. What I have to say is that there need to be a platform for women to support themselves and to support each other.
Mhm.
Because political world it's a very like Rilu said, you have to make sacrifices. You have to be very much willing. You have to increase your capacity, and then you have to fight. For those positions, and you have to strive for those. And when it's a woman it's very kind of harsh place for women to do it by themselves alone. So when we talk about women, I always encourage women's empowerment, but empower within one another, learn from each other, support each other. So we try to provide um, a platform, a neutral platform for women, so that they have an environment, kind of step away just for a bit, and then go to that environment and just talk to other women politicians and just share their experiences, share what's happening, what their challenges are, and kind of peer learn and share their experiences for one.
Alberel.
I think there were some problems in her internet connection. Yeah.
While we wait for Alberel to connect, Ninis, would you have a response to the question?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
hard question, I
When it
guess.
comes to,
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. We sorry, Alberel. We just lost you a bit, but can you?
Oh, it's
Uh,
fine.
yes.
Yeah, I think I'm having connection difficulty here. I do apologize. Should I continue on? I don't know where
Yes,
you guys
please.
lost me.
Yes, please.
So I was just mentioning that, how it's very important for women politicians to have a neutral ground for women, not just, so that they'll be able to share their experiences. And number two is that I see this a lot in the local countryside areas where women want to be a politician, but they're kind of afraid of the sacrifices they might have to make, or how they will be accepted and what they will have to give up, and how their families or their relatives will perceive. So I think, like Rilu said, I think it's much more important for women to have a very neutral, supportive platform that is provided by women themselves.
Mhm.
And number two is the environment around, so that women are much more understandable and willing to participate in politics, and they know kind of what kind of sacrifices and what kind of issues they will have to deal with.
Yes. Going back to Ninis.
yeah, I agree with Lulu and Alberel. Yeah, it's sometimes for a woman to be a politician, they have to do everything by themselves because first we always ask we always ask our capacity. How is your capacity? You want to be a politician? What capacity do you have? On the other on the other side is the male politician never asked that question. They never because just because a women are being asked about the capacity, but that it's not the same thing with the male politician. And as a leader, for myself, I realized that being a leader, especially in this field, it is
Mhm.
a privilege. I realized that I have the privilege because I have the support system. that can help me so I can be in this position. So it is important to have a support system from the our working space, from the families, and since because I have the privilege, so I think it is important also for me to give access, to give room for other women, especially young women, to participate, to to be part of this on this field, because it can show that women can also do the same thing like men, because sometimes to be part in the organization, yeah, because the consideration is about time, what about the family, what about, yeah, because there is an assumption that women just stay at home, not in the public space area. So it is important to make a space and also make a support system for women that wants to be on this political ecosystem.
Thank you, Ninis. Briza, we also want to hear from you.
All right, John, of course. Yeah, from my perspective, actually, I personally or deeply value mentorship and the wisdom that comes from women who have paved the way before us. So whenever, actually, right now, being in the position as well, actually, aside from being the position as a privilege, it is also a responsibility. So for you to prepare the next generation. So whenever I think about this position or different women-led movements, so I always think about what can I do to inspire others. So how can I create spaces for mentorship and leadership development? Because for me, um, it reinforces the idea that it's not only a success, but it's not only about individual achievements. The very aspect that you bring others along, it's very important. You have to ensure that the next generation has the tools, the confidence, and the support to continue. So, yeah, that's it for me, John.
Oh. So we, I know we have uh, one more question after this, but we move to our last segment,
Yeah.
um, which, as you have noticed in previous episodes, we try to make this sort of like a tradition to have a special closing segment. So for this particular episode, we're doing a final Q&A portion a la beauty pageant. Beauty pageants have steered mixed reactions amid the glitz and the glamour, but the contestants, poise and smart, stand out, especially during the final question. So
Mm.
through this last portion of the show, we pay homage to the women's intelligence. No, we have colored cards here, which represent selected years containing the questions to the winning answers of that year in the Miss Universe pageants. Each guest will choose one card and answer the question. So, who would like to go first? This is red, orange, yellow, green, and violet.
I can
I'll
go
go.
first. Yeah.
I'll
Oh, you can go ahead.
go ahead, go ahead. I mean, there's five colors and there's five of us, so
What were the
I'll
colors
go for
again?
orange.
Oh,
Elder, since you're on my last, so since you're on the left side of the screen, you can go first.
yeah.
What color?
Okay, thank you. Orange.
Orange. Orange is called year 2021, so that we're fair.
Okay.
2021. The question for year 2021 was, what advice would you give young women who are watching on how to deal with the pressures they face today?
Okay,
So
so
that's
what advice I would give just to young women?
yes. Let me repeat the question.
Um,
What advice
okay.
would you give young women who are watching on how to deal with the pressures they face today?
I think it's the first and foremost important thing as a young woman is to um, like the to understand who you are, like what your needs are, what your wants are, what your dreams are, It's very important for young women to have that own leadership within themselves, to understand what they are looking for in life, what their purpose in life, or what their goal in life is. It could be from, you know, educational achievements to career to, you know, like we said, in politics, participating in politics. But I think it's foremost important for you to understand exactly what you want in life, and you know what you need to do to get those. And I would just advise them just to never give up. You'll come across many challenges, many disapprovals, many disappointments. But I think if you know exactly what your long-term goals are, you will never give up. As long as you know your goal, what your goals are, you can always look forward and just keep going and never give up. You'll come across many hardships, but still make sure that you know you make yourself get up and just go forward.
There should be a clap, no?
Oh,
I'll read out the answer to that here. The winning answer was, I think the biggest pressure the youth today is facing is to believe in themselves, to know that you are unique and that what makes you beautiful. Stop comparing yourselves with others and let's talk more important things that's happening worldwide. I think this is what you need to understand. Come out and speak for yourselves because you are the leader of your life. You are the voice of your own. I believed in myself and that's why I'm standing here today. The winner is Harna Sandhu from India Miss Universe 2021. Quite close, no? Yay!
quite close.
Next one, Rilu. We still have red, yellow, green, and violets.
I'll go for violet.
Violets.
Hmm.
The
Wow,
year
nice
for
color.
violets is 1973.
Oh my God. Let's
This is a very timely question.
Wow.
I particularly chose this one.
okay,
The
let's see.
question is,
Mm.
let's make believe that all of a sudden you had $1 million.
Ah,
What's the first thing you would buy, and why would you buy it?
hmm.
I'll show it here. Yes. Again, the question, let's make believe that all of a sudden you had $1 million. What's the first thing you would buy and why would you buy it?
My God. You have asked the wrong person, but I think for $1 million, especially in 1973, it would mean a lot, right? It would mean a few $1 million now. But I think being where we are now, definitely I would, I think based on the current context of the mod is housing is a big issue. So I think being in the civil society space, I would probably invest in some kind of housing for vulnerable young people who move from one place to the other. So that would be something I would want to be build. Because personally, I'm not a very ambitious person, money wise. So yeah, because we feel that that exposes you to a lot of other issues that kind of restricts your progress in life. So definitely, probably a house where I could help other young people.
Okay, let's have another clap for that, please. Coincidentally, the answer for that here was the answer goes a house and lot because it's the most expensive thing and I can't afford it. If I had $1 million, I'd buy a house and lot and live by myself and other people, of course. From Margarita Margie Moran from the Philippines, Miss Universe 1973.
Ah, so
So
they also bought a house. I also bought a house. Good.
Everybody buy the house.
Women
same
think
issues
alike,
as
right?
today, no? um, Nines, we still have red, yellow, and green.
I just read.
Red. Okay, the year for red is 2007. This is from one of my favorite winners of all time. No? The question is, what is the one lesson you learned as a child that still affects your life today? Again, What is the one lesson you learned as a child that still affects your life today?
Oh, uh, when I was a child, I'm scared to express my feeling. So it impact until today because sometimes I still keep it just by myself. Sometimes, even though yeah, I have thing in my heart, it's not easy to talk. For example, like anger of when I'm sad, especially as a leader, I cannot show it to my team. How frustrating it is to be a leader. So yeah, I think it is important that we can show our expression so people can also understand our feeling, our situation, because we are not living only by our own self. We live together. Human, we are is a social we are a social entity in this world, so it is important to show the feeling so we can understand each other. That's my answer, John.
Nice. Let's have another round of applause. The answer for that year was because it was held in Mexico. Hola, Mexico. I have been dancing since I was a child. I lived my life growing up among many students and teachers. I learned how to always be happy, to be patient, and to be positive. And this is what I want to teach to the next generation. Thank you. From Rio Mori from Japan, Miss Universe 2007. So the last one is Brisa. We still have yellow and green.
I'll choose green, John. That's my favorite color.
Green. The yellow one is really nice, but the green is 1994. The question for 1994, you know this. You know what it is. What for you? I'll show the question. What for you is the essence of being a woman? Again, what for you is the essence of being a woman?
I think that's the most. I think one of the hardest
That's a
questions,
difficult one.
difficult question.
Mm.
But probably I'll answer it in a way because of the recent happening right now. So for me, the essence of being a woman lies in her strength, resilience, and of course the ability to inspire change. So whenever we talk about ourselves, so the women's power is in our voice, of course, our choices, and the spirit to uplift other while staying true to ourselves. So that's the essence of being a woman for me.
Yay! Another round of applause. I say that you should know it because the pageant was held in the Philippines in 1994. No? The answer then was I think being a
Ah,
woman by
yeah.
itself, right? The very fact that you're a woman is a gift of God, which all of us must appreciate. The origin of a child is a mother and is a woman. And a woman is the one who shares love and who shares and shows a man what love, caring, sharing is all about. That is the essence of being a woman. From Sushmita Sen from India Miss Universe 1994, which was held in Manila.
Yeah, most
The
love.
the last
Yeah.
one,
Go,
the
John.
last I will not answer, of course. The last one is 2019, and I think it's appropriate to share. No, the question then was, what is the important thing that we should teach young girls today? And the answer
Mm.
then was, I think the most important thing we should be teaching young girls today is leadership. It's something that has been lacking in young girls and women for a very long time. Not because we don't want to, but because of what society has labeled women to be. I think we are the most powerful being on the world and that we should be given every opportunity, and that is what we should be teaching these young girls, to take up space. Nothing is important as taking up space in society and cementing themselves. From Subsini Tunzi of South Africa, Miss Universe 2019, right? And I think that also concludes our show for today. Thank you very much, Ninis,
Oh,
Alvarel,
Thank
and Rilu,
you.
for
Thank
joining us
Thank you for
you.
today.
having us.
And thank you also, Brisa, for co-hosting. No?
of course.
We'll have to take off Alvarel, Ninis, and Rilo from the stream so that we can close it. But thank you again for joining us today. No.
Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
having me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Brisa, you're still here. And that
Yes.
has been the Election Observer episode on the representation and inclusion issues and challenges that women face in engaging and participating in democratic processes and institutions.
Yes, and of course, get the latest news and updates about our annual programs and activities via our Facebook, X, and LinkedIn and TikTok pages. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube and WhatsApp channels.
I have one last question for you, Brisa.
Yes, John.
Who run the world?
Of course, girls.
We have been your hosts, John Antiquera and
And I am Briza Rosales. Have a great day, everyone. Bye bye.
bye.